Now we go live, and everybody should be able to see it. That's true. Okay, yeah, now it popped up. Let me paste this in Telegram. I gotta open Telegram. Oh, we haven't started the recording yet because we don't have everybody here yet. Well, it makes it more difficult to edit because they're not starting at the same time and they don't have the sync. Oh, walking on the sea of clouds? I can't really... Walking on the sea of clouds. What's it about? What? What's not good? Yeah. Oh, you can only hear Joe? Dang it. I went live and it just stopped on me. Did that work? No. Nope, hold on. I still can't hear you. HyperX.
Be on your end, I guess.
Oh, yeah, it's on my end. I fixed it. They should be able to hear now. Somebody say something. Somebody other than me.
Something.
Something
in the way she moves.
Something's happening.
All right. Let's see if Londoner says it's all good now.
Are we good? I used to be good. I got over it.
I'm good at it. Good to go. Good as it's gonna get.
All right. All fixed. OBS studio issue. See, it's just small things, but they keep adding up, and it's causing us to get a late start. And
well, and Norbert and Nishant.
Yeah, I see Norbert is... Was he still in the show notes?
Yeah.
It's too bad there wasn't a way you could just stream the window straight to YouTube without having to use OBS.
Technically, there's a way to do it directly from Discord, I think. But OBS gives you a bit more control.
Yeah.
Plus, it would work for this stream, but you know, if I wanted to share something directly from my desktop, it's easier.
Oh yeah.
Or you know, a second camera, it's easier from OBS. Norbert did say he was going to be here, so we're going to wait for him before we start the audio sync and all that jazz.
Ta-da, 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 ta-da.
Okay, I don't want to minimize that. Move that over there. Oof. Have you guys been watching crypto?
No.
It has
Been
been
watching it plummet.
bad, yeah. Just horrible crashes. And then
What do you
once
guys
I think
think
it's
about-
done crashing, it crashes more. What was that?
What do you think about Miami basing their entire city economy on their own Bitcoin? Well, not Bitcoin. What's it called? Miami coin?
Their own cryptocurrency?
Yeah.
I think that's a terribly bad idea considering the volatility of crypto.
Well, they've gone all in on it.
And then I think that they're a bunch of idiots. You need to wait for the crypto market to get a little bit more age on it, become a little bit more stable.
It's the kind of thing you would expect to hear about happening out west
Well-
before someplace like Miami.
Well, the U.S. government is looking at taking the U.S. dollar digital, which I think is a really smart move because, you know, how often do people actually carry cash?
Isn't that what Tether is?
Well, USDT is its value is based on the U.S. dollar, and they use they're supposed to use actual U.S. dollars to back it. So every time someone buys, a dollar, what the heck is that, Moss?
That's a Canadian $20 bill. It's made out of plastic. Do not put it in the clothes dryer.
So every time somebody buys a USDT, the company from USDT will buy one, but it's not the only our cryptocurrency that's tethered to the U.S. dollar or the value of the U.S. dollar. There's also USD, and then I think there's U.S.
Well, the stock market is also crashing.
Yeah, that's also heavily affecting the crypto market. It's not just the energy consumption and Russia possibly, banning cryptocurrency mining. It's also the fall in the value of the dollar.
Yeah, I've got some stocks that have crashed so badly it's not worth it to cash them out. But
Just hold.
one of them that's been crashing, they've got $40.5 billion in the bank. They're not hurting.
Yeah, it's panic right now because of a lot of things that are going on, and inflation, of course. But if you have the extra money, now might be a good time to get into either stocks or crypto, just because of how low the price is, and there should be some kind of bounce back that happens. I keep saying that, and then it keeps falling further, so don't listen to me.
Well, I noticed that Bitcoin had gotten up over $61,000, and now it's back to 35.
Yeah, it was at 63, I think was the high, 63, 64, somewhere in there. Maybe it was 65, I'm not sure. But yeah, it got way up there, and then now it's in the 30s again.
Yeah, there for a while. I had Ethereum earlier on, and I bought in between 28 and 3,200, and then it just got way out at the 6,000 level, and I'm going, no, I'm not going to touch that, and now it's back down around 3,200 again.
Well,
which is a good reason not to buy it, because you can't handle volatility. Stay out.
Yeah, I've been buying Shiba Inu, and each time it drops, a heavy drop, I'll buy some more, and then I just happen to not have any extra money when it was at like 18.0000018 or something like that.
Well, let's
because I'd already bought it like 22 or something. Started. Well, as soon as Norbert, is sat down and ready to go.
Norbert, are you a ghost? Nope, he's
Norbert,
not a ghost.
Norbert, the friendly ghost, friendliest ghost we know. I really wish that they would do something like Zoom where I could put a backdrop here. This wall would be maybe I should just buy something to plaster up on the wall. Yeah.
I'm having something made for back behind me because that looks awful. I'm well aware, but I got nowhere else to put that fridge.
Well, considering our plans are to move out of here as soon as possible, I don't want to really be investing a whole lot into making this place nicer.
I'd say yours is at least sterile.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if you've seen my chaos.
Yeah, yours ain't a heck of a lot better than mine, is it?
Yeah. But no,
Like
I've been
I say,
using...
mine is just perfect for a backdrop, and if I were using Zoom, that'd be built in.
I've been using Jitsi for one of my other podcasts, and yeah, the nice thing about that is changing out the backgrounds. You can put any picture you want there. It gets a little funny if you don't have that nice even background, because sometimes things will pop in and out, but it's still pretty cool to be able to have whatever in the background.
Yeah.
I've not tried Jitsi yet.
No, I haven't either. I heard it doesn't work well with Firefox, so I don't use it.
That seems counterintuitive. Isn't that the open source option? Jitsi?
Where are you, Norbert? We're 22 minutes past time.
Oh, and I don't have my cup of coffee because I was busy fixing stuff. I have a whole pot in there just waiting to be poured into my cup.
Uh-huh.
I have returned.
You have returned.
For good.
Not for evil.
Yeah.
Forever.
Okay.
Okay.
Moss, do you want to do the whole...
I can do the whole. Are we ready on Audacity, people?
I think we are.
Okay, it'll be 3, 2, 1 record, and then
Wait.
I'll follow up with a 3, 2, 1, and we all 0. So, we are ready?
Yep.
Yep.
3, 2, 1, record. Muy bien, gracias.
I got a
That's
plane
good.
going overhead during my silence here.
That's all right. That's what it's for. We're ready for zeros. 3, 2, 1.
Zero. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
Slowly.
we're here.
And once again, I don't have the intro or the transitions set up for today. I need to fix that right after the show. Okay. Are we ready?
We
Right,
are.
Sorry, I'm editing the.
Mute the mic.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you really bulked up that security update. Okay.
Remember, this is supposed to be a 2 to 3 hour show. If it gets much over 2, I start freaking out or melting out.
Who wrote that we are all mocking Cosmic? Oh, sorry. I realized why it's there.
Okay.
It's a mockup. Yeah.
I'm going to get started. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. From the recently thawed South, I'm Joe.
Lorem ipsum dolorsit amet, Norbert. I
Nishant
had no
wasn't
better
able to
idea.
make it.
From the land of no sail, I'm Moss.
From the currently freezing Midwest, I'm Bill.
This is episode 379. This is episode 379.5, recorded on Sunday, the 23rd of January. Livestream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at mintcast.org. First up in the news, Linux Mint Edge is out. PinePhone Pro Explorer Edition can be ordered. GNOME and Plasma have new versions you can test. News on Ubuntu 22.04, Microsoft buys a Blizzard, NVIDIA and Wayland play nicely on Plasma, and we are all mocking Cosmic. In security, FOSS is a national security issue. The Linux kernel is in patches. Microsoft decides not to force locks. The hippo is dead, and Flatpak fixes appear. Then, in our wanderings, I fix things, Moss installs things, Bill works on things, Norbert writes things down, and yeah, that's it. In our innards section, we talk about how much security is enough. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. Although, I don't think we have any feedback this time.
I had an idea for the news that we should try. How about we take turns in reading the news articles?
Okay.
That should be less monotone than one person reading them and everyone pitching in.
All right, I'll start off.
Okay.
And then, how about...
I will do the GNOME one.
Oh, okay. Then, Bill, you want to do the second one?
Sure, that'll work.
All right, first up in the news, Linux Mint's brand new Edge ISO is available to download. Users with newer hardware may run into other incompatibility issues on the regular Mint 20.3 release running kernel 5.4 LTS. Fortunately, Linux Mint 20.3 now has an Edge ISO featuring the 5.13 kernel and the Cinnamon desktop. 5.13 introduced support for AMD GPU FreeSync via HDMI, along with many other hardware improvements. However, 5.13 did not fully support all the modern hardware like Intel Alder Lake processors. You can choose to download the separate Edge ISO or update the Linux kernel from the Update Manager under the Linux kernels option.
I'm thinking, since now Pop! OS has its own kernel maintained, Will and Pop! OS releases seem to have the most recent kernel as opposed to Ubuntu. So when the next LTS comes out, I assume Mint will follow the kernel that is provided by Ubuntu. But will the Pop! OS LTS have kernel updates? Because hardware compatibility is one of the biggest issues with releases that don't have the latest kernel.
Yeah, and I can see why it would be important for Pop! OS when they to rev their kernel to make sure it's compatible with any new hardware they might have coming out.
So my question is how much is that true for Mint as well? I would assume less so, but still, people might want to install it on very recent hardware.
Well, that's kind of the problem I ran into with this one. I needed to get into the Update Manager and go with the more up-to-date kernel just to get the video driver working. It's nice to I don't know, if you install with a kernel that you're comfortable. Well, anybody that writes an ISO, put the kernel that you're comfortable supporting on that ISO, and then give the option to update to the newer kernels if you want to, but make it clear that there's always going to be a chance that things might stop working. I've always thought Mint's claim to fame was that, you know, you could pretty much get this stuff working on anything. But I don't know. Like when I first installed 20.03, it came with the 5.4 kernel, which is considerably behind. And what are we up to now? 5.15?
Yep.
So, and that's not actually even, as far as I know, that's not even available yet. I think the highest you can get on Mint is 5.13.
Well, 5.15 LTS is out, 5.16 is out, and they're working on 17 now.
Okay, so I'm looking on the Mint. Through the update manager on Mint, you can get 5.13. That's the highest you can get. Through the GUI.
Nishant is asking on Discord if it's too late for him to join. He managed to...
Huh?
He can.
Let him jump in.
Should I tell him that he can?
Yeah.
I mean...
You're the guy doing the audio editing, so
Yep.
I'll leave it up to you.
Sync it up.
All right.
Maybe if we do a second 3 to 1.
We could do another zeros, yeah.
Yeah.
Is he here yet?
Don't look like it.
No. He asked 5 minutes ago. I just now replied.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one then.
Yep.
Okay, so you can now pre-order the PinePhone Pro Explorer Edition Linux smartphone. Pine64 announced today that their latest PinePhone Pro Linux-powered smartphone is now available for pre-order for everyone who wants to buy it. The PinePhone Pro Explorer Edition is aimed at Linux developers with an extensive knowledge of embedded systems and/or experience with mobile Linux, said Pine64. You can pre-order the PinePhone Pro Explorer Edition from the official website for $399 US. So,
Steadily, we're getting there.
I mean, I just wish if they would release this thing and then the Lineage people would offer an official image for it, I would go to it right now. I would use it right now, no problem. But there's just, I think it's going to be real hard for most people to break out of the, you know, the Linux or the Android ecosystem.
Joe,
Yeah.
you need to shoot that plane down.
Indeed. And, well, there are some attempts to make it so that Android applications will run. I can't remember the distro that I tried that had that built in on my Pine phone, and it just did not work really well. It took forever for anything to load. I think it was one of the Fosh ones. But
Yeah, Manjaro and Fosh.
yeah, where it had the like Antbox built in so that you could try and run Android applications, and it just was not implemented well. And I do need to bust out the Pine phone and try out a couple of more distros on it and see how they all work. Because I was enjoying doing that, but yeah, I'm not gonna spend $400 on something that's not gonna be a daily driver for me.
Well, can you even make calls and send text messages on that Pine phone?
If nothing else, you could make Google calls. I don't know. Probably you can. I didn't put my SIM card in it. I probably should have, but you know, I like my Note 10 Plus.
Yeah, I've got one of those too.
Yeah.
It's one of the most powerful devices in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't heard too many people complaining about the Pine phones. I mean, you did buy them expecting to have to work on them.
Right,
and
right.
expecting
But
it to take a while to get there. The
what you
main
don't-
problem I see is if they release a phone that will work in 2 or 3 years, won't the phone be obsolete by that time?
Yeah. Yeah, and what you don't hear about, you hear about people buying them, but you don't hear about people using them as daily drivers. You hear everybody that buys it and uses it saying it's not ready to be a daily driver yet.
Yeah, Graham on Late Night Linux, he was sort of forced into it because his phone went out on him on a weekend, and he had this Pine phone that they were passing around like a peace pipe, and he tried to get by with it for a weekend, and he just said, even with his technical know-how, he was really struggling to have a reliable something or other to even send messages on. So it will be interesting when somebody gets a hold of this, the new one, because it is a considerable upgrade hardware wise.
Well, it'll be interesting when a major manufacturer decides that they don't want to pay the Google tax and actually implements Linux properly on a mobile device. So,
well, I bought a used Google Pixel 3a XL for $160, and it works just fine, and it's upgraded to Android 12, and it's not Linux.
And the hardware is pretty much on
I'm
par.
saying $400 for a phone that you may not even be able to use as a phone. When you can get a phone that you can use as a phone for $160.
And it's not like the Pine phones use top-end hardware. They're using, a generation or three back. And
I'm pretty sure my Pixel has better hardware.
Yeah. So you're paying less money for a used device that you get more functionality out of and just performs better. Now, I still love the Pine phone. I still think it's a really good idea, and it will eventually lead to something that's usable and good, but it hasn't yet.
But at least it's not a purism.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. All
Can
right.
you elaborate on what's wrong with purism?
What's that?
Can you
what's wrong with purism?
What's
wrong with purism is that they are charging a premium price for a phone that doesn't work yet.
But that's just the one that was all manufactured in the US, no?
Well,
no, the one that's all manufactured in the U.S. is $2,000. The one that isn't all manufactured in the U.S. is $1,200.
The problem with purism, the problem with purism is all of the grand promises that was made and the overextending they did in terms of what they promised that thing would be able to do. And it was being... The difference between Pine 64 and purism is this. Pine 64 makes this thing and sells it to the community as a community project. Purism has this thing that I've yet to see it that actually exists, and it's sold as a product.
Yeah. I also get the feeling that, Pine isn't really trying to make a profit on these devices. They're trying to get them out there to... actually make a market, and then
they're
eventually
literally donating their profits to other open source projects.
They make so little on everything they sell that
the purism product is called the Librem 5.
Correct.
And they are trying to make a profit. But yeah, I mean, it's good to make money, but the market really isn't there yet. So let's move on.
Yeah.
And that's my cue.
We're looking at you, Norbert.
Trying to not mess this up. GNOME 42 desktop environment is now... Yep, I messed it up. GNOME 42 desktop environment is now available for public testing. GNOME 42 is now in alpha... GNOME 42 is now in alpha state pre-release version, ready for public testing. The biggest changes are around the GTK4 and libad beta components. Most of the GNOME apps were ported to libad beta to implement a dark style preference, so these apps will be able to provide both a light and a dark theme. Other important changes are the replacement of the gedit text editor with the more modern GNOME text editor, and the replacement of the GNOME terminal with the new GNOME console, which is intended to be a more user-friendly terminal. Other changes include the revamped screenshot utility, an improved GNOME Software Center, lots of Wayland improvements in Matter, and improved fonts. Those interested in trying the alpha version of GNOME 42 can use an unstable distribution like Fedora Rawhide or OpenSUSE Krypton. The next development release, GNOME 42 Beta, is scheduled for release in mid-February. The final release of GNOME 42 is expected on March 23rd, 2022. I'm counting the days. I'm really looking forward to this. Libadwaita will either be a really good or really bad thing in the short term. In the long term, I think it might be a good thing. If it does settles on things.
Well, I'm not a big GNOME user, but it seems like a good update.
That's the article. Does
Bill,
anyone
your
have any-
mic's not on.
We can't hear you.
There we go.
Oh, now it's.
My question was, am I properly informed here? With GNOME 42 and libadwaita, if a distribution wanted to properly theme GNOME 42, they would have to drop in, replace the entire libadwaita. Is that how that works?
I think that will be the case.
Okay. So like
But-
Ubuntu
but-
could just make libyaru and
Yeah.
things of that nature.
But under the hood, that might be a less hacky and more clean and in a cleaner solution. I'm not sure. It won't be as easy, that's for sure. But what the GNOME team wants is to have a platform so that they can tell developers, you can come and develop for our platform because you have a consistent. Because we have the tools to provide a consistent experience for both developers and users. So
Right. The GNOME team wants a system that nobody can use but them.
debatable.
It's so GNOME, I don't know. GNOME's got to put a desktop on people that are using this in banks and big businesses, and Red Hat's got to charge people for this. I can almost understand. I don't necessarily like it. I don't necessarily dislike it, but I can understand why they would need something that is a bit harder to break with, the more complicated spaghetti code like you might see in other desktop environments. Not to say that that's the case, but I try to see both sides of the argument with GNOME. But
My
again,
argument-
yeah.
Sorry.
But again,
Go on.
I was just going to say the only thing I can almost forgive everything else about GNOME except for the tray icons.
Tray icons, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can almost put up with everything else.
We will get back to the tray icons within a couple of news spaces here.
Right on.
But yeah, my understanding is that my take is that if distro developers will be able to drop in replace libadwaita and properly theme things, that it's not that big of a deal. The problem seems to be that they won't be able to use their current CSS based themes. But if they are able to recreate that in a library, then it should work.
It's just forcing them to do it right.
But it's sort of going back to how theming worked before they were essentially CSS sheets.
Oh.
So this is that has already happened before. I assume. But at least the application that use libadwaita are using a new revamped version of the Adwaita theme. So not the one that was previously there. That had some weird, I don't know, at least for me, the gradients didn't look right in the previous Adwaita. That's why I started using Yaru, which doesn't have as noticeable of a gradient at the top bar. But the new libad beta seems to be more universally. But the new libad beta seems to be more solid. Seems to be more discrete. So therefore might be a better option.
Okay.
Also, I realized that add beta literally means the only one or the one. So it's ironic. Even its name was chosen. So even its name was a foreshadowing for this change.
Oh, nobody noticed. I think I literally read that written somewhere.
I think I posted it in one of the Telegram groups.
Yeah, I think when you install the theme, I think it says the only one somewhere. I can't remember where I've seen that, but when you said that, I thought, yeah, I've seen that somewhere.
Okay, Moss, do you want to take the next one?
I don't see why not. KDE Plasma 5.24 beta released with new overview effect and more. Plasma 5.24 introduces the long-anticipated support for fingerprint readers to unlock the screen, as well as to authenticate in apps, as well as to authenticate with sudo on the command line. Another interesting feature is a brand new overview effect that lets users control their virtual workspaces and find search results from KRunner all in one place. The new overview effect can be toggled with a Super W keyboard shortcut. The Plasma Wayland session continues to receive improvements in KDE Plasma 5.24, which introduces support for colors greater than 8-bit, a new drawing tablet page in system settings, and the concept of the primary monitor. It also looks like the Qt Quick based effect in Plasma 5.24 will work better on NVIDIA GPUs, and Plasma will now shut down faster than before. Plasma 5.24 beta is available for Plasma 5.24 beta is available for public testing right now via the unstable edition of the KDE Neon distribution, which they keep telling us is not a distribution. The final release will be available on February 8th.
Could you not set the primary display before in Plasma? It's interesting.
I'm not sure. I only ever used Wayland on like tablets and stuff, so.
So recently there was the 50-minute bug project announced by one of the Plasma devs, which aims to fix problems that the average user might encounter within 50 minutes of using the desktop. And I think one of the things he mentioned, I think it was an interview on Destination Linux, and one of the things he mentioned is that Plasma doesn't really handle multiple displays well right now, especially, more specifically when you attach and detach displays frequently. So if you have a panel on a display set up, but you unplug the display, I think you're only able to get the panel back if you reattach the display. But I'm not sure how. But I haven't used Plasma, so I'm not sure how display setup works.
Yeah, I've got Plasma, but it's on a laptop, and that seems to work just fine. And I was getting on with Wayland too, just fine until I started. Well, that week I had to use OBS, and that kind of forced me to move back to X.
I also realized that people keep saying that Plasma needs to simplify the settings app and have less menu entries in the settings, and now they added yet another one.
I think that criticism is always going to exist. I guess that's fine, but Plasma just is for the person that wants to have that sort of granulated control over their system.
Yes,
and
but it should still be. But yes, but it could be both accessible. But it could be both accessible for the average user and usable for a power user. What I think Plasma needs is 2 modes in their settings, so you can toggle between a simple and an advanced mode, with less and more options.
I suppose there is room for that. I would argue it's still better than the Windows system, where you've got this new, even on Windows 11, you've got the new settings menu where you can almost do everything with, and yet you still have the old legacy control panel. It's
Yeah, the new Windows setting. Yeah, the new Windows settings looks very clean, but a bit confusing for me, at least.
yeah,
It's a bit too clean.
they overlap there. When they come out with something new, they hold on to the old thing.
Because
And
there are some users, I think,
yeah,
many in enterprise environments that still require those old
yeah.
options.
Plasma is if you take a window manager flexibility and give it all the options of a GUI. Well, it's just that you can take viewer Harris. I hope I said that right. Said Plasma is if you take a window manager flexibility and give it all the options of a GUI. Yeah, I can see the logic in that. Again, it's just I think die-hard Plasma users use it because they can literally take it and do whatever they want with it. I mean, I've seen some pretty out there Plasma desktops. I get on fine with it, but I will admit you've got to have the time to sit down and learn the workflow of the settings manager in order to get the most out of it.
Okay. Well, I am going to read the next two if that's okay with everybody.
Go ahead.
All right. Ubuntu 2204 LTS will be powered by Linux 5.15 LTS and ship with GNOME 42. Canonical recently shared a few details about their plans for the upcoming Ubuntu 2204 LTS regarding the GNOME and Linux kernel stacks. Due for release on April 21st, 2022, Jammy Jellyfish will be Canonical's next long-term supported release and will receive updates for at least 5 years. Canonical employee Sebastian Bacher revealed the fact that the desktop will be based on the GNOME 42 stack, but it won't ship with GTK4 apps. Ubuntu 2204 will most probably use GNOME 41 apps, just like its predecessor, Ubuntu 2110. On the Linux kernel front, Sebastian Bacher said that 2204 will stick to the Linux 5.15 LTS kernel by default, which will be supported at least until October 2023. Some users had high hopes for 2204 to ship with kernel 5.16 as it includes support for new hardware. However, Bacher also revealed that the OEM and HWE hardware enablement kernel flavors will probably be upgraded to Linux kernel 5.17 at some point during Ubuntu 2204's life cycle.
And this brings us back to the kernel version question. So, do I understand it that because it's an LTS kernel by default, that Ubuntu LTS will not receive, the regular version will not receive any kernel updates, as long as, any newer feature updates, as long as 5.15 is supported?
Well, I think
Because
wouldn't be
what Debian does, for
surprised if
example.
they kept using 5.15 because it is supposed to be a long-term support and it is supposed to be more stable. So
Yes, but this means that any hardware that comes out this year or early next year will not have any support by default on Ubuntu LTS.
base, it'll probably mostly work, and then if you upgrade the kernel manually, then yeah, you
Yes,
will
but
have that functionality.
I'm not sure if a lot of people know how to update the kernel, or even seek out the hardware enablement version.
Yeah.
Edition.
you'll get hardware enablement by Canonical.
Well, there are lots of rolling distros out there to try if that's what you really need.
Well, if there's an option, because Ubuntu has that update manager, where you can, for example, switch between NVIDIA driver versions. So if users can update to a newer kernel via GUI, I think it's okay.
Most
Does
new
anyone know if
users-
Martin's Rolling Rhino is still going?
No.
I just heard about that last week, and I want to try it. I'm not sure how stable it is because it just switches to the development branch, which I assume is the same as if I were to install the new daily snapshot, and if I were to install the daily snapshot of Jammy right now.
Well, let's see. I'm on the GitHub, and it looks like the last commit.
But keep in mind, it's just a script for moving to the development branch, so it might not have to be updated as often.
Most new users of Linux are not going to be trying to install Linux on brand new hardware. So I'm not sure how much of a concern that actually is.
That's fair.
2 years ago. Wow. But, I mean...
Well, Martin hasn't been a canonical employee for about that long.
Right, yeah. Well, now there's a README updated 11 months ago. But that's the earliest. I'm not sure how much updating it needs because it presumably it's just a script.
Okay. Let's keep things moving.
Right on.
Microsoft to acquire Activision Blizzard. To grow their gaming business across mobile, PC, console, and cloud, Microsoft have announced plans to acquire Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion US dollars. The deal is expected to close in 2023. This would be a big win for Microsoft's Xbox efforts, while the impact on Linux gamers will be interesting. While native Linux game ports aren't expected, Microsoft's stance on Activision Blizzard games on Steam will be interesting, and ultimately, from there, how well they will work with Proton for Linux gamers. There's a bit more to that. I mean, looking at it, Microsoft has all these back titles and, you know, the new titles coming out for Activision Blizzard. And I'll get into the other aspects of Activision Blizzard in just a second here. But I don't think they're going to try and limit their market to the Xbox or Windows natively. And that doesn't mean that they're going to try and port to Linux by any means, but are they only going to make things for the Xbox?
I think so. There's been a lot of talk on how it's going to be impacting Sony.
Well, this would really limit Microsoft's ability to profit. Yes, they can buy the company and be the parent company, but, you know, other than doing a complete revamp of all the leadership in Activision, they should basically leave it to run itself. Now, Activision Blizzard has had some major issues in the recent past with their culture in general, and that's what Microsoft should try and fix, is the culture within Activision Blizzard, but then still allow them to create things that make them money.
Is Microsoft's culture anything to be emulating?
It has to be better than Activision's current culture. There aren't as many lawsuits against Microsoft that are making the news as there has been recently for Activision and Blizzard with the sexual harassment and generally the way that they, you know, treat their employees. So any type of revamp of their culture would be better.
I wonder what the current support level for Blizzard games is on Steam. I'm not sure how.
I don't
many
think
of
there
their
is
games are
any.
on Steam. Wait, sorry, not Blizzard, but Activision games. Are there? I think StarCraft. I heard about StarCraft being mentioned.
It was.
Is StarCraft an
I
Activision
think
game?
it got pulled.
StarCraft.
Oh, Call of Duty is on. Oh, I didn't know that Vampire the Masquerade. I have that. It's a good game. So there are Activision games on Steam, and hopefully they stay, and they should.
I mean, they will most likely stay. But my question is, will they have
New ones come out to it?
No, I mean, will they have a lower priority for Proton compatibility? than they currently have. I'm not sure how much they have.
Well, is it the individual game developers that work on Proton compatibility, or is it Steam itself that works on Proton compatibility? And I know that a lot of it is also probably the community.
I think it must be all three. I think there must be some things that only the game devs can implement.
There's a couple switches the game devs have to flip to make it work well, from what I understand.
Okay.
But it is a little bit of everybody. You can get the Activision collection on Steam for $847.81.
Is that all?
That's a lot of games, though. That's all of the Call of Duties. Well, some of the Call of Duties. And well, it looks like all of them. King's Quest.
With that money, you could almost buy a Pine phone. No, I mean a Librem 5.
Almost, not quite. It's a lot of
Buy
Call
like
of Duty
3
games.
Pine phones.
That's a lot of games, though.
Okay. Well, Bill, do you want to take another one?
Then where are we at? The
New
mock-ups
mock-ups.
all right, new mock-ups of System 76's plan for applets in Cosmic Desktop. Pop_OS Code Explorer Eduardo Flores.
You left out the exclamation mark.
Oh yeah, Pop_OS Explorer Eduardo Flores dug up a Figma design document made by System 76 that gives us a better look at upcoming Cosmic Desktop. Vanilla GNOME is pretty averse to menu bar items, and it groups several functions into one menu. On the other hand, System 76 mock-up for the Cosmic panel embraced task-specific applets. These panel design documents show very nice defaults that will just work for most users. But they also show that System 76 want to give users choices. In the screenshots, we can see the applets are open to repositioning, which you can do in Vanilla GNOME, but is a key feature of other desktop environments. Well, you can't do it in Vanilla GNOME, but is a key feature in other desktop environments. The sound applet shows media controls rather than only give us player controls. In the applet, there's an option to embed media controls in the panel instead. Throughout all of the applet designs shown in these documents, there's a real sense of convenience within the UI, reducing the number of trips one needs to take to the main settings app to tackle simple tasks like swapping audio outputs, switching Wi-Fi networks, or switching between Bluetooth devices.
And we have the screenshots linked in the show notes.
Yes, and they look interesting. They look basically like how Cosmic looks currently on Pop. And I assume this could also be because it's a work in progress, because it still has the workspaces and application buttons at the top left and the calendar in the middle. But at the right, it has a bunch of little icons and options and everything. This makes me want to have these tray icons more in GNOME as well. And it certainly looks more coherent and better implemented than what you can get with any extension of GNOME itself.
I want to get behind the GNOME people, but the tray icons is just something I wish one of them, I could talk to one of them and have them give me an argument against having the tray icons other than, well, it's just too hard to do, or the code is complicated. You install flagship GNOME distributions like Fedora and Red Hat, and they've got these extensions installed and running. So honestly, And on the other hand, if you're going to make it something that has to be an extension, make the extension ecosystem a little bit more fluid and less of a hack.
There have been multiple unofficial projects where people would create a front end for the GNOME extensions where you can not only manage them but install them and search for them, which is what the GNOME extensions app should be.
Yeah.
We also need to keep in mind that the new Cosmic Desktop is going to be written in Rust and based on the EFL libraries, not the GTK libraries.
No, that's Budgie.
Nope, that is System 76 Pop OS.
No, Budgie 11 is going to be based on EFL, not Cosmic.
Cosmic is based on Rust. Budgie's based on EFL, yeah.
Well, everything I have read, and as an owner of System 76 machines, I'm pulling that card, says that they are using Rust, but they are designing it around the EFL libraries.
Can you provide any source for it?
News.itsboss.com, Rust-based Cosmic Desktop experience. The 3 repositories needed, blah, blah, blah. Cosmic Desktop environments, yeah. Yeah, that's all Rust.
Well, I just did a search for Linux Cosmic EFL. And I only see news that mention both Solus with Budgie and EFL and Cosmic.
No,
I don't see any.
There's been a couple interviews on Jupiter Broadcasting talking about this, and they've come on saying it was Rust-based. And who made Rust, by the way? Is that a Google project?
I thought it was just iron and oxygen.
I just remembered there's a Wikipedia page called Benevolent Dictator for Life, which is a title given to a small number of open source software development leaders, typically project founders who retain the final say in disputes or arguments within the community. And I just looked at this list today, and I think I saw... No, it's not Rust. It was Python. Okay, disregard what I just said. But yeah, I don't even think... So I tried to think about what the reason could be for GNOME not having tray icons. And maybe just they want to have the panel look super clear with only the absolute necessary stuff. Which, I mean, I would argue that tray icons are a necessary element. But maybe they want to make it more symmetric. Because on the left, the size of the activities button, and on the right, the size of those buttons that open the settings drop-down menu is about the same. But if you open any application, then it won't be symmetric because you will have an extra. You will have the name of the application on the left. So I think they could. Maybe they don't want to have. So I think the most likely reason they don't want to have tray icons is that every application that would take advantage, that would have a tray icon, would have its own icon, and they don't want the look and feel of the panel to be inconsistent. Because currently there are only plain white icons. So they don't want to have a mix and match set of icons there. Which is sort of understandable, but they could have just another drop-down specifically for tray icons. Or they could implement it in the already existing settings drop-down menu.
Yeah, I don't mind them being hidden. I just want to be there, you know?
Okay, any final comments on this?
Moving on.
Nope. Next up, we have our security update.
Should I do this?
Yes.
Okay. After Log4j, open source software is now a national security issue. A meeting at the White House on Thursday saw executives from some of the tech sector's biggest companies meet with administration officials to discuss the need for better security in the open source community. The list of attendees include big names like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle, Apple, among others. Was there anything else in the who wrote these? Was it your boss?
This is an article from Gizmodo.
I just pulled it right out of the article that was linked.
Okay, so I think I will read some more stuff from here. It's not hard to see why the White House has convened its meeting right now. Just a month ago. Okay, that explains that. In short, there's clearly room for improvement, and thankfully attendees of the recent White House meeting seem fairly amenable to it. At the meeting, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan apparently called open source software a key national security issue. Similarly, Google's President of Global Affairs and Chief Legal Officer Clint Volker published a statement to the company blog on Thursday, arguing that he wanted to see better support for the open source community. For too long, the software community has taken comfort in the assumption that open source software is generally secure due to its transparency and the assumption that many eyes were watching to detect and resolve problems, said Volker. But in fact, while some projects do have many eyes on them, others have few or none at all. In his statement, Volker further suggests increased public and private support for open source projects, that is the establishment of security and testing baselines, and the development of a rubric. What's a rubric?
Where are you at?
Anyway,
I'm looking for it.
And the development of a rubric for identifying critical projects, the kind that gets a lot of views. For example, probably something like Log4j. Well.
Okay. I actually had a discussion on this topic Friday night on the Linux Lugcast, and an interesting point was brought up. You have like single points of failure here, and you have one person, as was the instance with Log4j. You have one person running that, and then you have all this flack that they're getting because something happened with Log4j and it wasn't secure. It was a one-man show that he was basically doing in his free time and not really getting paid for. And you have these major corporations making millions and billions of dollars that aren't donating back. So I'm hoping this is what they're talking about by, talking about supporting open source and what is it? Increased public and private support for open source projects. So yeah, if you get more support and you get more money going towards these projects and you're paying these developers, they can actually dedicate more time, or have more people working on these critical aspects. And yeah, Log4j was something relatively small, and any type of logging is important, but so I'm not going to say it's unimportant. But then it ended up in everything, and then an exploit comes up for it, and everything is impacted because it's literally everywhere. So you can't really complain and blame the developer if you're not going to support him.
The weird thing about Log4j is that, if I understand correctly, any logging tool is supposed to be able to read the state and output of a program and then log it. But Log4j also had privileges to execute commands.
Just arbitrary code right there from the log.
Yeah.
For some reason. Somebody in the beginning thought that'd be a good idea, and then put it in there, and God knows who and when, and
put it in for some type of testing purpose, and then didn't remove it, or they used code snippets from something else that did need that functionality. And yeah, that type of thing happens when you're a one-man band.
I think HTTPS is also, so TLP HTTPS is also developed by a single person. So that might be another time bomb.
Oh yeah, there's nothing unique about it.
Considering how widely used that is, that guy needs a lot of support, and basically it needs to be his only focus if he's going to be the only guy working on it, which means we need to pay him that way.
Yeah.
Was it was the only major catalyst for this White House meeting Log4j? Oh, sorry. Was
No,
Log4j really the only major catalyst for
no,
this
it
White House meeting,
wasn't.
or were there other?
Actually, there in this article, there was another. They actually said that there was another one recently, but I can't seem to find the section.
There's it. It is just a month ago. Just a month or so ago, a pernicious bug was found in the popular open source Apache logging. That's for Log4j.
Yeah, that's for Log4j.
Okay,
I
I think I see it.
But there are others
Oh.
that have had similar issues.
There's hundreds. This is nothing new. I mean, there's nothing unique about Log4j. Log4j just brought it a little bit more into the mainstream because everybody's phones is running Java, and it's a little harder to turn it into a story about esoteric hardware or software when everybody and their brother is carrying this vulnerability literally in their pocket, you know.
Yep,
But
here
it
we go.
brings to light.
I found that section. Log4j isn't the only open source debacle to occur lately. Just last week, the creator of two widely used software tools decided to inexplicably disable them via a number of bizarre software updates. Mark Squires, the man behind popular JavaScript libraries Faker and Colors, weirdly blitzed the programs and managed to take down thousands of other software projects that relied on them for success. And he's offering it for free, so you really can't complain if your entire business model depends on it and you're not throwing money at the guy.
Yeah, but that was yes, but that was deliberate by
Yeah, it
the
was.
developer.
And if he's the guy developing it, it is perfectly within his right to nuke the whole thing. Nobody's paying him for it, so he can do whatever the heck he wants. As far as I'm concerned, he's the owner of it.
And that was his main motive, to make people aware that
He needs paid.
That developers who make something for free, that a lot of people and companies rely on, needs compensation.
We need to form some kind of foundation to raise funds to pay these individual developers. Get people to sign up for them, and then
you need
try and
these,
raise the funds for it.
You need these major tech corporations that are making all of this money to donate something back.
Yeah, get a foundation to go around and knock on doors of these places and say, hey, you're using this code, and this guy is sitting here starving to death and is getting mad about it. So
Slack.
Yeah.
The problem is corporations don't operate that way. They want to invoice things. They want to have companies that they pay on.
But see, if you give it to a
receivable.
foundation, then they can have it as a donation, and it's a tax write-off.
Yeah, an entire infrastructure would have to be set up for this.
It's needed, so...
I mean, would there have to be a completely new organization, or couldn't, for example, the Free Software Foundation do it?
They would have to make it part of their charter. It would have to be official. Yeah. Or the Linux Foundation, or... I mean,
well, Linux Foundation has long since stopped worrying about Linux, except for keeping the funding going for the kernel. They've about 80% of their project is non-Linux.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Okay, that is a topic that we could probably dedicate a whole show to.
Yeah.
But did you want me to take the next one, or do you want to do all the security?
I can do one of them.
Okay, go for it.
New Linux kernel vulnerability. That's a hard word. New Linux kernel vulnerability patched in all supported Ubuntu systems. Discovered by William Liu and Jamie Hill-Daniel, the new security flow CVE 2022-0185 is an integer underflow vulnerability found in Linux kernel's file system context functionality, which could allow an attacker to crash the system or run programs as an administrator. Yeah, there seem to be a lot of similar bug fixes each week. So that's just another reason. That's another reason to keep the kernel. That's another reason to keep security updates, to take security updates seriously. And does anyone have anything to add to that?
Keep unattended upgrades working.
Yeah. Microsoft's new security chip will not lock devices to Windows 11 as feared. New PCs released this year that ship with Microsoft's Pluton security chip will still be able to run other operating systems beside Windows 11. While it was initially feared by the open source community and others that Pluton would serve as a means to lock equipment to the latest version of Windows, that isn't the case at all. Instead, in addition to being able to install Linux and BSD, PC makers and even users themselves will be able to turn off the feature entirely. The first Windows 11 PCs with Pluton built-in were shown off. That's not very interesting. Pluton itself can act as a trusted platform module or as a non-TPM security coprocessor, according to a new report by the Register. Essentially, the new security chip will serve as a way for Microsoft to show chip makers how it wants TPM to be present in microprocessors going forward. Interesting, funny story. My brother just built a new computer, and he put it together today, and he wanted to put Windows 11 on it, and he started the installer, and he was greeted with a message that it is not supported, and it's a pretty high-end PC. So my guess is that it doesn't support TPM 2.0 because the motherboard must have a secure boot by default. It's even a very recent Ryzen CPU, so there shouldn't be any problem with that.
Tried putting it on my daughter's Omen that's got the TPM 2.0 and secure boot and I think it's a 7th gen i7, and it came back saying
no, that's too old. I think it has to be at least a 9th gen or 10th gen.
Well,
so
from what I understand, there will be workarounds, at least at first. And like now, there are workarounds for unsupported devices. And, I am okay with them forcing everyone else to buy new hardware, because that will make the bottom drop out of the used hardware market, and I profit.
Yeah, and Windows 10 will be around for a while, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that's all right.
4 more years at least.
Yeah.
I don't mind using older hardware. It's more likely that Linux will actually work correctly with it.
Correct.
Ubuntu 21.04 Hirsute Hippo reaches end of life. Upgrade to Ubuntu 21.10 now. Depending on where you live, the time has... okay. No, I don't want... where is the strike through? Okay, they don't need strike through. Dubbed by Canonical as the Hirsute Hippo, Ubuntu 21.04 was released 9 months ago on April 22nd, 2021. It was the first Ubuntu release to use the next generation Wayland display server by default for its Ubuntu desktop flavor, which used a modern version of the GNOME desktop environment. Ubuntu 21. Wait, I mean it wasn't. It was the one that It was the one that where it decided to not have GNOME 40, but still stick with the 38 instead.
Yeah.
Ubuntu 21.04 didn't make the plunge into the GNOME 40 desktop environment series due to its redesigned activities overview, but it did ship with support for GNOME 40 apps while being built on top of the older GNOME 3.38 desktop environment series. It was also shipped with the 5.11 kernel for all official flavors, and it also introduced initial pipewire support, NF tables as a default backend, NF tables as a default firewall backend, support for smart card authentication, as well as a redesigned Yarudark theme for its Ubuntu desktop flavor, which was a really nice theme. However, being an interim release and not a long-term support one, such as of such as. However, being an interim release and not a long-term support one, Ubuntu 21.04 only receives software and security updates for 9 months. As such, as of January the 20th, 2022, it officially reached end of life. This means that Canonical will stop offering updates for Ubuntu 21.04 users, which means in time the system will become vulnerable to all sorts of threats and attacks. Well, it has been 3 months, so they do provide a 3-month window after release of a new version before the previous one is end of life. So people had 3 months to migrate from Hearth Tupo to Impish Entry. So I'm not sure if... I mean, it's always interesting because time flies so fast. One day you see news about a version being released, the next day you see it reaching end of life.
I thought 19.10 shipped with Wayland. They said in here that was the first one to use Wayland, and I don't think it was.
I don't think either. I think it was the one where it defaulted to. I think it was the first one where it was the Wayland by default. I might be wrong.
I thought 2204, 1910 came with it, but I don't think they've started shipping it by default yet. I think that's going to start in 2204. I could be wrong.
Oh, well.
We'll have to have our fact-busting audience chime in on that one. They've been spot on so far.
Okay. Flatpak 1.12.3 released with important security Flatpak 1.12.3 released with the Flatpak 1.12.3 released with important security fixes. Alexander Larsson released Flatpak 1.12.3 as the third maintenance update to the latest Flatpak 1.12 stable series of this open source and popular Linux app sandboxing and distribution framework. The Flatpak 1.12.3 is an important update and it fixes 2 critical security updates found in Flatpak such as CVE 2021-4386, a vulnerability that could allow a malicious repository to send invalid application metadata in a way that the app's permissions are hidden during the installation. Also fixing an issue affecting the Flatpak builder component of Flatpak, which can cause the Flatpak builder tech-miner screenshot URL commands to access files outside the build directory.
That's mirror screenshots, not minor screenshots.
What?
Mirror screenshots.
Okay, sorry. I will read it again. Also fixed is an issue affecting the Flatpak-builder command. Also fixed is an issue affecting the Flatpak builder component of Flatpak, which can cause the Flatpak builder mirror screenshot URL commands to access files outside the build directory. In addition to the security fixes, the Flatpak 1.12.3 release adds support for more pulse audio configurations, such as those used in WSL2, improves the handling of extension updates from multiple repos, improves command line output for non-terminal targets, and fixes the Flatpak run session bus command. Yep.
Okay. And that is it for our security update.
One more mention here. I was wrong. It wasn't 19.10. It was 17.10 that came with Wayland.
And then they undid it in 1804.
I'm just saying that they said that was the 2110 was the first one to ship with Wayland default, and it wasn't. 1710 came with Wayland default.
Yeah, that's true, but they went back on that because it
wasn't ready yet.
Yeah.
Okay, now then, go ahead, Joe.
Off to the bi-weekly wanderings. And first up, I serviced all the bikes in my backyard, getting all of them moving. Although at least one of them could use new bearings in the back, but I don't have the experience to do that yet. Then I suffered, because Texas got cold again. Stop doing that. I updated the BIOS on my computer, and it's not really because I had a problem or anything, but because I'm thinking of upgrading my CPU. There were some security updates involved as well, so it was good to do. But for a while there, I was having problems restarting my computer where it would say failure to init. I'm not sure why, and it's not happening every time. It might actually be because my power supply is super old and I need to replace it. But it does seem to be working with the new kernel now, and if I want to upgrade the CPU, I can. Several people are sending me care packages of fun things to work on. My stepmother is sending me 2 laptops. One of them is a 17-inch. I'm not sure about the other one. Bill was sending me a laptop. We'll get to that in just a second. Moss is sending me headphones and various electronics, and Josh also sent me a pair of headphones. I got
Which Josh?
Thacker. Josh Thacker. I got the headphones from Josh. Real nice pair of Superlux HD 681s. I'm actually using them right now. If you're watching on the YouTubes, they had a bad 3.5 millimeter jack. Was definitely not difficult to fix. I was able to get that replaced, but I'm all out of like male jacks, so I'm using a female jack and a male-to-male adapter to get it working right now, and it works really well. Like I said, I was able to get that replaced, and I also switched over to the Brainwaves ear pads that Josh sent along with them, and I need to get out my desktop amp and see how they sound when they're getting pushed, because if I remember right, these are like 32 ohm drivers inside them. And thank you, Josh. I also got a package from Bill, but there was a small problem. Bill was sending me a 17-inch laptop, but what showed up was a very nice Bluetooth-enabled turntable. Amazon tells me that this is a $270 device. We have informed the shipping company right away, and we're waiting to see what they do. And don't know if I'll need to return that turntable or not, or if the shipping company will straighten things out with the laptop. I have no use for a turntable other than to either sell it or give it away as a gift, but it is a really, really nice turntable.
Well, I have a use for it, but I probably couldn't afford
the
much
shipping
on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I took the laptop to, well, I'm not going to name names here, but it starts with a U and rhymes with UPS. And they didn't like the box I put it in, so they slid it into this sleeve sort of thing that's kind of like, I mean, it's made for shipping laptops. They wrapped it up. They printed the label. They gleefully took my $50 and carried the laptop and the label to the back. What happened after that is anyone's guess. Well, I suppose you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out that they got the labels probably mixed up with whoever was sending a rather nice looking modern turntable to somebody.
Yeah.
We're hoping that whoever was expecting to receive the laptop, or whoever was expecting to receive the turntable and instead receive the laptop, that they go and take it and
Are like, what the heck, man?
Yeah.
Fix this.
What a nightmare.
Yeah. But
what
we'll
has
see.
Brown done for you lately?
Well, there you go, right there.
If they say that they can't get the laptop, I'll end up putting this up on the market and probably try to get $200 out of it and try and buy a laptop. Now,
there you go.
Watching the crypto market crash has been fun. I have followed my own advice, and I have not put in more money than I could afford to lose. And as soon as I put it in, I consider that money to be gone anyway. Still, watching the numbers get cut in half has been crazy. If I had the liquidity right now, I would put more money in. But I don't know if the market is done crashing. With everyone realizing that Bitcoin is using as much electricity as it does, equivalent to a small country, it is becoming less and less profitable and more regulated. This most recent crash is attributed to the inflation of the dollar and more so to the potential ban in Russia due to energy consumption. That being said, new ways of working around the energy problems are in the works with the Ethereum 2 blockchain, for which I do have high hopes. Crypto is not going anywhere, but it is still very early days, and who knows what the landscape will be in the future. Even the US government is looking into using a government-backed digital currency, which, yeah, that seems like the obvious way for them to go. Instead of, printing out bills, they create a digital currency and use the blockchain to track it. And that would also allow them to more correctly tax people for their income and output, as it were. Now, a couple of things I didn't add into the notes here. My grandma recently got a virus on her computer, and it's got this number to call. And now I'm not in Florida to take a look at it and fix it, and so this has been kind of a major issue. And I can't tell if it's just a fake CryptoLocker virus or if it's an actual CryptoLocker virus and all her stuff is locked up. And even your low-end viruses, if you don't have the virus protection already on there, they're pretty good at preventing you from installing them. And I don't know anyone in that area that is good enough to run a live disk and get rid of it that way. So what I've advised them to do is pull the hard drive from my late grandfather's computer and put that into grandma's computer if she knows the passwords, and then she'll be up and running again in no time. Otherwise, it's time to do a reinstall, and I can talk them through the reinstall, but that's it. What's up, Bill?
I'm talking to my kids that think this is a great time to come down and put groceries away.
You saw everybody rushing through here a few minutes ago. So yeah, same thing. I thought you were waving at me, though.
Oh, no.
So yeah, there's not a whole lot I can do to help her from 800 miles away, and I'm not going to drive out there just to fix her computer. And she does have a laptop she can use in the meantime.
I assume it's running Windows.
Yeah, it's running Windows. But if I were there to fix it, I would try running a live disk that allows for scanning and removing of viruses. Because trying to do it while the system is running can be extremely difficult in Windows if the virus has any type of built-in thing that prevents you from installing a antivirus. And yeah, that's mostly what I've been up to lately. Moss, how about you?
Well, I have been typing.
You want us to come back to you? We can do that.
There, I'm done.
Okay.
I just installed another 8 gigabytes of RAM in my T560. 8 screws, pop the back, click it in. Didn't even get any messages. I just had 16 gigs instead of 8. Yay.
Good job, boss.
We had a lot of fun, me, Josh Hawk, Tony, and Dale, doing Distro Hoppers Digest once again, our 29th episode since starting it on April 2019. It even ran over an hour, which is a rare occurrence. I think having 4 co-hosts kind of makes it run a little longer. I'm still current and weekly on Full Circle Weekly News, which I took over from Leo. I seem to have a small but devoted following, been doing that since April. And I still have not mailed that box of stuff to Joe. I considered reopening the mintCast book club, but not this time. Apparently, I talked to Joe about it, and he was taking some flack for his reports, and so I'll just leave mine off this time. So that's it for me. I don't want to take up too much time here.
Yeah, if the listeners have changed their mind and they want us to add in a section of the stuff that we're reading and listening to, I would love to be able to do that on the show, let us know. Send us an email.
Moving on to page 7, let's go to Bill.
Well, all right.
If we also had stuff that we've been, if we also had, we could also add stuff that we've been watching.
Yeah, that would be me, maybe.
Reading, watching, and listening.
Absolutely, I'd be down for that.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, so this week's been another busy one. I haven't spent a whole lot of time working on my computer, though I did take some time over the last couple of days. I've been setting up the infrastructure for a new podcast. I'm working on a project with a couple friends of mine, and if I can make a quick shameless plug for it, although it doesn't exist yet, the name of the podcast is going to be Three Fat Truckers. It's going to be three of us guys that yes, thank you. Yeah, it's three guys that you probably wouldn't listen to or talk to about anything important in real life, but we've all got microphones now, so there you go. I might talk a little bit more about things that we talk about in the future. I've learned that setting up the infrastructure for these things is pretty formidable.
Now, I have a silly question here, because I don't know. As a trucker, are you required to get a ham license?
No.
No. Okay.
No, CB radios operate on. I assume you're talking about the radios.
Yeah.
They operate on citizens band frequencies, which is what is it, 127.185 megahertz, which is free to use by everybody, and as such, it's not very powerful. It's not as prolific as it once was either. When I first started driving in the early 90s, when I came home from the Army, everybody was on the radio, and you got close to highly populated areas, you couldn't get a word in edgewise. But the proliferation of the smartphone and the newer generations of drivers that have come along and are using newer technologies, people have gotten away from the radios. Now, we still use them. My particular niche of the industry, we use them to check in with scale houses and things like that when we get to our customers. But no, ham license. There are one or two guys out there that operate amateur radios from their cab, but that's a relatively, I don't know, that might be a dying breed right there. As I was saying, between the setting up the YouTube page, I think we're just going to do a simple thing where we record something on YouTube, and then maybe just get the audio from that and just post it on archive.org and do a RSS feed and all that, just to keep it simple at first.
You should definitely do the process and then bring that building of the process here onto the show and talk about doing it from scratch and making your own podcast. A lot of people are interested in that and would love to hear about it.
Yeah, and this, I'm learning this as I go. I'm at the point now where I've got the YouTube. So I secured the domain 3ftpodcast.org, and I've set up one email address because as you know, it's Google, they're wanting to charge you more now for the, what do we got going on right now? We got a G Suite account, and they're wanting to charge more for each individual email address. So what we've done, we're just setting up the one email, so it's going to cost us $6 a month for that, plus the $12 a year for the domain. I suppose we can live with that. And then we set up the YouTube channel. One of the other guys is working on the artwork to make an icon and a banner. And I'm kind of trying to. I have no idea how to make a web page, but I'm trying to put together something Set up an archive.org account, because that seems to be the best way to have a place to host the audio only copies of the podcast. So I suppose, just to keep it simple, we'll probably live stream to YouTube, much in the same way we do it here on the mintCast, using OBS, and everybody will be able to see our lovely faces. And then maybe just use something like YouTube DL to get the audio from YouTube, and then put that on archive.org. And then that is pretty much where I'm at right now. I've still got to set up the however it's done from there to get it out in the world, searchable and downloadable and scrapable by podcast catchers. That's where I'm at in the learning process. But we've got the YouTube, we got the archive, we've got the Google Docs and the Google Drive, and
FeedBurner.
Now, what does that do? Does that generate the RSS feed?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't. I know we've got a FeedBurner on DistroHoppers. Tony is in charge of that, so I don't really know what it is, but I know we've got it, and I know it's part of our process. So yeah. I'm just giving you a word to go look up and see if it'll help.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down right now and look that up. Like I said, it's a learning process. It's fun, but, there is a considerable amount to be done with it, especially if you want it to be something that people can actually go out and find and listen to. But I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be, as long as we do, peek behind the curtain. We'll take individual Audacity streams for a podcast like this, a well put together product such as the mintCast podcast. We take individual Audacity streams, and the person, in this case Norbert, takes these streams and doctors them up, stitches them together, puts bumper music in, and you end up with a finished product. That is a huge task. We're not going to do that at first because we don't have anybody with the time, but that is not a task to be taken lightly. So, podcasting is a job. It's respectable.
Yeah, it takes me between 1 and 2 hours to produce a 10 minutes or less podcast for Full Circle Weekly News.
Yeah. And the more people you've got in the stream, the more complicated it can get. Okay, so yeah, work has been extremely busy. I don't see that ever letting up. The whole world is in the middle of a driver shortage right now. Nobody can get their kids to school. Nobody can get their trash picked up. I don't know if anybody's aware. There's a lot less. If you live in the Midwest or up north, there's a shortage of snowplow drivers. I mean, people are not going out and getting CDLs as much as we would like them to. So those of us that are in the industry, if you're willing to do the work, it can be a positive experience. I've been home every night. My regular truck's been in the shop. I ruined the throw-out bearing, which is a part of the clutch that makes it go in and out. And then they found a problem with the turbocharger and a lot of other stuff. So I've been in a day cab type truck for the last week and a half, and it'll probably be well into this coming week. So it's been home every night. I've been kind of enjoying the break from some of the crazy stuff I usually do. The only tinkering I have done, so last night, this new system I bought to do the podcasting on came with 16 gig of RAM, which is fine, but I'm also wanting to do a little bit of playing around with virtual machines and stuff like that too, and run 2 or 3 of them at the same time and compare resource usage. So I thought it'd be good to have at least 32 gigs of RAM on it. And well, as I've said before, my server back here, it came with 8 gigs, and then I spent a considerable amount of money upgrading the RAM on it to 64 gigs of ECC RAM, which is error correcting code RAM, which is what it is recommended to have if you're going to run a checksumming file system like ButterFS or ZFS, because it keeps you from flipping a bit in between the more complicated copy on write process. Well, I had noticed that I never even come close to using that 64 gigs, so I just pulled 32 gigs out of that and stuck it in this machine. So now both machines have 32 gigs. The reason I did that is because, well, at first I was just going to buy 2 more sticks of 16 gig, and I looked up how much I paid for this stuff I put in the server, and they were about $117 a stick. So promised the wife I was going to slow down my spending habits on the tech gear, so I figured I would just go that route for right now. And that worked out okay, so I think I'm just going to let that ride for a while. That's pretty much it for me. How about you, Norbert?
Well, I'm almost finished with the exam season, with the winter exam season. There's a meme, a picture showing a crustacean in a dark underground cave, in a dark underwater cave, with the caption that this creature has adapted to the crushing pressure and oppressive darkness. So that is, I think, a good summary of the exam season for a university exam season. But in the meantime, I had a little misadventure with Arch Linux. So I heard it multiple times that with Arch, you are supposed to keep up with the blog posts on the Arch website, and sometimes they might tell you that you need to do some manual intervention when updating your system. So recently, people noticed that updating their system resulted in freeing up around 300 megabytes of space. That's because the Linux firmware package was split up into multiple packages to not have to install as many unnecessary firmware by default for every system. And I looked at the blog post, which says the Linux firmware package now implements kernel firmware compression. Linux kernel from 5.3 on support loading from XZ compressed firmware. config_fw_loader_compress kernel option must be enabled. So I assumed that. So when reading that, I thought, okay, I just have to manually add a kernel parameter to my bootloader entry, and I should be good to go. But the thing is that all of this config fw loader compress is in all caps, so I was a bit confused. So I went to the Arch Linux Telegram channel, and it turns out it's not. And it turns out it's not a kernel parameter for a bootloader. It's a kernel flag for compilation. Which means I didn't really have to do anything as long as I just installed the kernel from the official repositories. So I could just simply do the update, and it took care of everything. So my complaint with that is that I think my issue was that I misunderstood the blog post, and my complaint with that is I think it's because it wasn't worded as well as it could have, because it says a kernel option must be enabled, and as someone who has never compiled a kernel for a system that I was actually, as someone who has never compiled a kernel, at least for a system that I was actually using, I'm not very familiar with compile flags, and I assumed by kernel option they mean a kernel parameter in the bootloader. So, and I'm not sure if other Arch users mistook it for a kernel parameter as well. But yeah, the blog post could have been better worded to avoid such confusion, which at least I know I had. And then I did the update, it freed up 300 megabytes, and my system became a little lighter.
Admittedly, in my case, running Arch, reading that blog post page has been a an after measure more than something that I do before I run the update. Probably because I've had so good of luck for 10 years now of it not breaking down. Usually, maybe in 10 years I've had four cases where I've had to, something went wrong and I had to go back to that blog page and it said, yeah, this update requires manual intervention, and I was able to go back and fix it after the fact. But yeah, I've not always been proper Arch user that reads that. There used to be a project out there called Pacmatic that would source that blog page. You would run Pacmatic in place of Pacman, and it would source that page prior to actually running the update to, and I'm not sure how it worked exactly, but I think it searched for keywords in the updates and would require you to manually intervene in those cases, which I'm not sure how many people do that. Most people just use Yay or one of those AUR helpers to run their updates. I don't know. I've got another problem on mine. I've got an update where it's wanting to import a PGP key, and then it's saying that it can't connect remotely, and then it borks the whole upgrade. So I don't know. I'm almost to the point where I don't have time for it anymore.
There is still a package that prevents you from updating until you read the blog post. So it fetches the blog post for you. It looks for new unread posts, but I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, Pacmatic used to do that. I don't know.
Wait, I found it. Informant. It's Informant in the AUR.
Oh, okay.
But when I installed it, it marked by default every single blog post from the past 1 year or so, maybe 2 years, which I had to go through and all mark as read. But after that, it works. I'm not sure if it, because the AUR helpers are essentially on top of Pacman. I assume if you use those, it would still work.
Okay. I think we've spent enough time on the bi-weekly wanderings. Let's move on to the Linux innards. Okay, this week on our Linux innards, we are talking general security practices for Linux users. And maybe some pro tips. Boss, you're up first.
Well, I'm up first because I'm probably the least security conscious person here, similar to most newbies. I make sure the firewall is turned on. I've gone back and checked some of the distros I've installed places and found out that I don't have it turned on, so I try and make sure the firewall is turned on. I don't play games. I'm very cautious about opening uncertain emails. Got a good spam filter and all that. On top of that, I do have Surfshark VPN, and I usually run it as a plugin in Firefox. Although I also use it on my Pi 4 running Ubuntu Mate 20.04 before opening Kodi and its plugins. I recommend using a VPN at all times unless it is absolutely essential to do something that won't run with the VPN on. I've used Mullvad, PIA, and Surfshark. The main reason for using Surfshark is that I got enough money to buy 26 months at a shot. Otherwise, I'd still be using Mullvad, the only one that really has a monthly payment program that's affordable. I have used the free stuff on Proton, but the paid stuff is more expensive and I have more devices. Surfshark allows unlimited devices, and Mullvad only cares that you don't have more than 3 running at one time.
Now, couple things there. With the emails, it's always good practice to, I didn't include this in mine because I didn't think about it, But it's always good practice to not click a link in an email, especially if it says that it's from your bank.
Or if it says it's from a friend you haven't heard from in a while and there's nothing else in the body of the message but a link.
If you receive something in Facebook in a message and you click on it and it says for you to log in to Facebook, guess what? It's fake and they're going to steal all your stuff. Well, they're going to steal your password and they're going to log in and then they're going to send the same email to all your friends and ads and all that fun jazz.
I love the ones that tell me that someone has logged into my Facebook account and I should go log in and see if it was really me or what was going on. And I'm going, I closed my Facebook account 3 years ago, so that's not very likely.
Or you get all kinds of them like that. I get them all the time saying somebody just ordered some huge thing on Amazon.
Right.
You log in and...
Did you just order an Apple iPad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as
nice
to the,
try, buddy.
As to the VPNs, I have recently heard very good things about Mulvad from some other podcasters. So
yeah, I have too. I can't remember.
It was excellent to use. It was easy to use. The app was very good. It was easy to use IPv4 or 6. And WireGuard was built in.
And
so,
PIA will let you use up to 5 devices. And if you're paying the yearly on that, then the cost is actually pretty low. The month to month, it goes up a little bit higher.
Well, Surfshark is cheaper than PIA, and it allows unlimited devices. I could literally give my login to my cousin in Missouri, and he could use it for his devices. Anyhow, terms of passwords, I'm split between letting Firefox or Bitwarden manage my passwords. I know Bitwarden is more secure, but it's not as persistent. The only way to get it to run all the time is to disable a security setting. It's easy to do, but it feels like doing so scuttles the whole idea of using Bitwarden. I keep trying to get Google to stop storing my passwords, but that's an uphill fight. Bitwarden is definitely the way to go. Your passwords are encrypted just for you, and you have the option of self-hosting for free or paying them a whopping $10 per year to host. And that's about all I've got to say.
And, oh, by the way, Bitwarden is open source.
Yeah.
And it is available anywhere. It's a browser extension. It's an app on your phone. And it's an Electron app. I think it's Electron app on the desktop too. But that I thoroughly recommend and support Bitwarden. I too have the $10 a year.
And we are not accepting advertisement from anyone, including Bitwarden. So this is not DLN.
No, but I don't mind giving credit where it's due, I suppose.
Okay, you can take it from here, Bill.
Right on. Okay, so one thing that has been disturbing me more and more lately is a lot of the phishing scams, such as the ones we were just talking about, where people are being tricked into giving up personal information. You know, now some of these scams, people are being sort of scared into giving up personal information. Like some scammers will pretend to be the IRS and tell people that they've got a subpoena waiting or something like that, and they're getting ready to be hauled into court, and they might end up going to jail and this and that. We just need you to log in here with this information, and or like we was saying before, something's going on in your Facebook, you need to log in. And what these people will do is they'll provide a link and an easy one-click solution to fixing these problems. And a keen eye might be able to pick these things out, but if you send these scams out to enough people, you're eventually going to get somebody to fall for it, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand how these things work. So as an example, one entertaining one that happened recently was a Facebook post. What was on the Facebook Messenger? My wife sent me a for a local jewelry store that was offering a particular ring for a way unbelievable price of $69.99. And when you touch the link, you're taken to a website that looked completely legit. And it looked like it was for the jewelry store. Until you go into the menu, and there were some obviously misspelled words as in the menu options. That was my first clue. There was some awkward flow to the website too, but the point is that it was whoever set this up went through the trouble of obtaining a domain that was close to the domain name for the legitimate business, and then setting up the infrastructure to make a website that looks like a proper place to go and buy stuff, and then you are led to a process that collects your credit card information, and then you are scammed. So how do we protect ourselves against these things? There's never ever going to be a substitute for learning how to conduct yourself when you are online. The worst folly possible is to believe that just because you're sitting in your house with this machine, you are safe in all the things you do. It's also not a good idea to just assume because you have antivirus on a Windows machine that you're safe in everything you do. You have to learn how to conduct yourself. When somebody sends you a link in some sort of messenger, some sort of email, and it's got anything to do with anything important, well, I would argue don't click on links from emails and messenger, any kind of messenger messages anyway. But at the very least, right click on that link and observe the actual URL that link is taking you to. Because in most cases, it's almost obvious that the website is something way out there that's got nothing to do with the legitimate business.
In many cases, the link that you see on this, the name that you see on the screen that is linked, if you hover over it, you'll see it's a completely different name on the website, and
yes, and
that's an easy way to tell.
Now that was how I picked it out right from the beginning. But arguably, a lot of people might not know to do that. That's always a good way to know right up front that you're dealing with somebody with nefarious purposes in mind. It's just to take a look at where that link is actually taking you. And in my case, that particular link, just for the sake of morbid curiosity, I opened up Firefox in a container image, completely siloed off from the rest of my system to take a look and see what this was. And it was just some bogus website trying to collect people's credit card information. So, folks, it's very important that you do not click on links that people send you, because it's the chance that you're going to be taken off somewhere and taken advantage of is just way too high.
Another fun one is the job offers that you get.
Oh, gosh.
And it's for an unbelievable salary that you could never possibly be offered in the real world. And they say, well, we're from XYZ Corporation and we need someone with your experience and skills and blah, blah, blah. You look at the email. If it's a very unprofessional looking email address, and especially if it's not at xyz.com, depending on what the name of the company is, I'm using XYZ as an example.
Great company to work for.
Yeah, well, if the email company does not match the company name, then you're probably dealing with a scammer right there.
Do a little research in a case like that. Look up this company that they're representing.
If their email name is is a bunch of scrambled letters, or if they're using an unusual font, PayPal is not going to send you something from p.xyz a.y.p.a.l.com.
Right. And it almost always is too, some long unintelligible hash of letters, numbers, and characters at such and such.com, and you're like, yeah, nice try, buddy. But again, unless you're in the know, you're not gonna know that these things aren't real. Yeah, in this case, in fact, I actually went to the legit website, and this ring that I was being attempted to be sold for $69 was actually a $2,400 ring. So that was all the convincing I need. So if
it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so I actually went so far as to report that domain to Google and Microsoft.
I would like to point out another scam. I'm sorry to be butting into you so
You're
much,
fine.
Phil. You really have to watch out for romance scams.
Yes.
Someone writes you and they say, well, I really am into you, and you've never talked to them enough for them to be that into you in the first place. They send you flowers. If you accept the flowers, the odds are those were actually bought using a stolen credit card. If you accept them, you are receiving stolen property, and you are as much at guilt as the sender. And then they usually try and say, well, I'm going to send you some stuff. I'd just like you to look it over and then rebox it and ship it onto this other address. And that's receiving and distributing stolen property. And they usually stick you with the shipping charges. Well, I'm going to repay you as soon as I get blah, blah, blah. And yeah. So
that reminds me, in the very early days when I very first started even using computers, period, I was using AOL, and I was single at the time. And I remember, what did they call it? AOL Love or AOL Match or something like that. And I had gotten an email saying that somebody is interested in talking to you. Log in here. And I hit that link and logged in. Next thing you know, somebody was using my AOL email address to spam people all over the world. And yeah, so that's getting into people's pocketbooks, scaring them with IRS stuff, and tricking people by way of the heart. That's all the nefarious means people are going to use to try to rope you into something.
Oh, the other fun one is where they send you a check, and if you're supposed to then turn it into a money order and send them the money order, and it turns out that well after the time that you cashed the check and sent out the money order, your bank says, well, that was a bad check, and you're stuck.
Yeah. Well, that happens a lot with if you're selling items online. And so if you're selling a motorcycle and somebody offers to buy it without actually seeing it first, it's probably a scam. And they're going to send you a check for like 3 times what the value, what you're trying to sell the motorcycle for. And they're like, oh, send me the rest back. That was a mistake on my part. Go ahead and cash the check. Send me the rest back in a money order. And then guess what? You're on the hook for everything.
Yes, always wait for the thing to clear, but you'll still be stuck with the bounce charges.
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that one. That's great. So then I wrote down here another way a potential scammer trick you is by sending email and text messages that appear to be from an online vendor. But we went over that. Yeah, the people that pretend to be Amazon or pretend to be Google, pretend to be eBay, and they'll send you messages saying, hey, you've got this problem with your account.
Yeah.
Click here to log in and fix this problem. And that's not how any of those how any of those businesses operate.
I'm also going to say that Microsoft support is never going to call you. Now, that sounds like something that everybody should know, but evidently it's not. Let me say it again. Microsoft support is never going to call you.
Yeah. I think none of these people are ever going to call you. They are well aware that is.
And your bank is never going to call you. They will tell you that. If they do call you, they will tell you what your access stuff is, not ask you what it is.
Yeah. I do get
If
irritated
your
when my
bank
bank
ever calls you, and I've had this happen before when my bank actually called me because there was an actual problem. You say, okay, tell me about the problem, but I'm not going to provide you any information. I'm going to call my bank and try and get put through to you. So give me your extension.
Yeah. I get irritated at my bank that sends emails, and then they'll send a link in that email.
Yeah, I'm not clicking that link.
Yeah, no, never.
I'll log into my bank and see if they sent me a message there. And if they sent me a message there, then I know.
Yeah. Moving on. So yeah, passwords. We talked briefly about passwords and password managers and how important they are. It's important to also understand that in terms of security, passwords are a perishable layer of security. The longer you keep the same password, the less entropy it has. Or more entropy it has. Less, more, whatever. You have to, yeah.
The more vulnerable it is.
The more vulnerable. There you go. It's good practice to create a rotation in your passwords. Bitwarden will actually remind you to do things like this. It's written right in. It's great. I'm probably as guilty as anyone else of letting passwords go way too long. But it's good to keep them. I would say at least 8 characters long and unreadable. Because any password, if you make passwords out of dictionary words, you're hacked the second you made that password. Because any password a human being can remember, a computer can crack in seconds.
I have heard that you can string words together, and as long as they're not related words, that still makes a more secure password.
I suppose you have to weigh. I mean, if you're not using a password manager, I mean, setting aside the argument that you should, but if you're not using one, I suppose stringing some words together and throwing in a few rememberable.
I've heard security experts actually say to use like a sentence, except to put leet into it, leet speak. So you're using characters and numbers and things like that. And then you're just using a phrase that you're going to remember, but it's not going to be easily crackable because you're doing things like taking out spaces and replacing E's with 3's and et cetera, et cetera.
And I would argue if you're doing something like that, it's even more important that you rotate your passwords.
Yeah.
But isn't leet speak universally recognizable to an extent that it might be not as effective as like doing something more random?
Yeah, something more random is obviously going to be more secure, but it also depends. If you're using something random, then you really need to use something like a password manager. But if you're not planning on using a password manager, the next best thing is to use a phrase or a sentence, a series of words, and then have replacements for some of the characters.
I would like to put in a statement about password managers other than Bitwarden. Many of them have been hacked. Many of them have been found to not even use hashtags for your password protection. And you have plain text passwords sitting out there.
Yeah.
Bitwarden encrypts everything, and they can't read your passwords.
And they hire people to try to hack them too.
And they have been audited, and everything has gone through. It doesn't matter. Maybe you like LastPass, maybe you like something else. They have been hacked. Bitwarden has not.
So in other words, what we're trying to say is we like Bitwarden.
The check is in the mail, guys.
Oh man, if only. Okay, so there's many services out there that claim to give you some layer of security online, and I would say that they're well-meaning, but there's never, as I said before, there's never going to be a good substitute for an individual learning the risks as well as how to protect and conduct his, her, they, their self. I think we've all grown, well, perhaps not all of us, but enough people have grown a little too accustomed to service providers offering a layer of protection between them and the internet. And I think people should probably pay more attention to what they're doing. Those of us that came from the early days of Windows can remember that antivirus culture that companies like Norton and McAfee ushered in. These services were valuable, but I believe the unfortunate side effect is that people pay less attention to what they do online. And that's unfortunately probably the case to this day. Know exactly who you're interacting with and where you are online. What I mean by where you are, know that the web page that you went to, the URL that you went to is the actual business that you are wanting to do business with. And always avoid the temptation to just follow a link to some page somebody wants you to see. At least examine the link for what it really is, and maybe copy and paste that link into the title bar instead of just get in the habit of doing things like that, and then you'll be in the habit of paying better attention to what you're doing. It just takes a little attention to detail, and you can experience all the benefits of doing business online safely and largely without incident. So that's it for me. How about you, Joe?
Well, for me, despite being a little paranoid, I still take a pretty laid-back approach to security. In comparison to a lot of people, I make sure that every account that I have that offers two-factor authentication has it set up, and I suggest that everyone does this with all accounts that matter to them. Two-factor authentication is not perfect, but I know you've heard me say this before, and I'm just going to keep reiterating a lot of things when it comes to security because that seems to be what's needed. But if you're not the low-hanging fruit, then you're not the target. So two-factor helps with that. Now, if you are a specific target, then yes, there are ways to hack past two-factor. You saw that recently with the Crypto.com hack. They got completely around that, but that was bad implementation as opposed to like someone stealing your cell phone number in order to be able to get your two-factor authentication. That still does happen, but a lot of cell phone companies have adjusted their practices so that it's less common. Now, a password generator and management system is a single point of failure, but it's also very useful for making and keeping less hackable passwords. In the end, if someone throws enough processing power at cracking your password, they probably can. There are ways to prevent that, but not everybody implements those. So what I mean by a single point of failure is if you forget the password to your password generator, or if the company that creates that goes out of business, etc., then all of your passwords are gone. And you're not memorizing them because they're completely indecipherable. But most important, I would say, is a VPN of some kind. Now, I've said this before as well, but a VPN is just playing past the trust. But if it is one that even if it is just one you set up at home, that's passing the trust to your home network. But it's still a good thing to have. It does not need to be paid for. It can be roll your own. It's important if you're planning to get on any public Wi-Fi or public network or any network outside of your own control. You don't know what kind of encryption or security they're using and what kind of access other people on that network have. It will protect you from a lot of common attacks. It will prevent the simple things and encrypt your packets so that no one can just reach out and grab them. Yeah, the YubiKey. YubiKey is good for two-factor authentication. Thank you, Moss. Another thing that I suggest is some kind of ad blocker. And now a lot of the ads that can come up are scam type ads. I know you've seen them, and it says something's on your computer, click here to fix. And a good ad blocker will prevent that. I use both a local blocker in the form of uBlock Origin and a network-wide one in the form of a Pi-hole. This can reduce the amount of network usage that you get and also increase speeds. Plus, ads can be extremely annoying. I've seen pages that just look like a splattered mess when you don't have an ad blocker. And then you add an ad blocker in and you're simply getting the data that you came into that website to look for anyway. Now, some less security-oriented and more like prosumer type of things. Own your own modem. Some carriers can make this difficult and will not provide support for it, but you can save money on a month-to-month basis by owning your own modem instead of leasing from the provider. As an extension to this, I also suggest not getting a modem router Wi-Fi router combo. Have a separate router Wi-Fi router. That way, if your modem goes bad, you still have internal networking. And if your router goes bad, you can do a quick replacement and get back up and running quickly. If you have the router modem combo and it goes bad, then you lose everything and you have no networking available. The other thing about this is if you have your own modem and you have the ability to adjust the settings within it, is you can do things like set your DNS. So your provider is not collecting as much information about you. Granted, they still know everything that you're doing, which is another reason to use a VPN at home if you need to. But once again, that's just passing the trust to the VPN provider, which is why it's good to have a VPN provider that is known for not doing logging, which is why I like PIA, because it hasn't been proven that even after they changed ownership that they're doing any kind of logging.
How can we be absolutely sure of that?
Well, I don't know now that they're not doing logging, but in the past, before the new ownership came in, there were actual court cases where they went to PIA and said, give us the logs of this person's activity with a subpoena. And PIA came back and said, we can't do that. We would if we could, but we don't log.
Yes, but currently,
I can't prove the whole negative thing. So I'm going to trust them until proven otherwise.
Well, you can look for court cases where they've been subpoenaed
recently.
Where they've been subpoenaed to release log information and they just didn't do it.
Another thing is they say to look for a VPN that is hosted in a non-5 eyes or 12 eyes or however many eyes country. And they say, well, these people are in Panama and they're not part of it. And then you look at who's controlling Panama. And the country is almost completely controlled by the CIA. So I wouldn't trust Panama.
Now, something even less security related and more just prosumer and pro tip is have your home directory on a separate partition from your OS, if not a completely separate hard drive. This makes nuke and paves much easier when it comes to recovering from something catastrophic. Even if you decide not to use the old home partition, at least the data will still be there for you to recover into your new home partition. And that can also lead into a conversation about encrypting just your home partition or just your /home directory. And as long as you keep the password for that somewhere safe, then you can recover that in the next time you do a complete nuke and pave.
An alternative to that is what I do, which is you know what programs you have. Those go on your home partition, but you keep your app data, your spreadsheets and documents and everything on an external.
Yeah. And another thing that I've seen recommended is keeping your home partition on a USB flash drive, encrypted or not. That way you can take your home partition with you. And if you set up on another computer, you just plug it in and you point it to the home and you're good to go. And then basically you can take everything you do, your entire setup, wherever you go, to any machine that you use. And yeah, that's really all I have.
I did something similar when I was experimenting with running a distro off of a external USB SSD, where there was a data partition that I was normally using just for moving files between computers and storing files there. But when I created a root partition on the same external drive, I just decided to use the data partition as if it was the home partition for that system, and it works seamlessly. But yeah, security wise, I've never used a password manager, and I don't really plan on using one in the future either. I've been developing my way of coming up with passwords that are, at least I hope, that are at least in my opinion, easy for me to remember, but still not very easy to crack. I'm not going to detail how I do it. I'm not going to detail my method because that would obviously make it less secure.
Tell us about it, Norbert.
Yeah.
We want to know.
Yeah. Well, one part I can tell is that there were cases when I even incorporated made-up words in my passwords that I think don't appear in any dictionary of any word because I came up with them.
One method that I used to use for generating passwords is I go grab a book, and just any book on my bookshelf, open it up to a random page, find the largest word on that page, use the first half of that word, open it up to a different page, find the largest word there, and use the second half of that word, and then whatever page I ended up on, or flip to another page, and then put that in the middle. Except instead of, the numbers, I use the characters. And so half caps, half characters, and then flip to another page and get the numbers at the end, and completely random password.
Yes, but it's still not very easy to remember, depending on the word.
Yeah.
Sometimes I base my passwords on either in a way that I can associate them vaguely, very vaguely, with the service I'm signing up for, or even something that has been going on in my life around the time when I created that account. So yeah, there are passwords that I do replace regularly, around yearly, and those tend to be my longest passwords, and I'm still able to remember them fairly well. But yeah, there was one instance when, around 2006, so many years ago, one of my classmates accidentally mispronounced the word in a very interesting way. And that was a word that I'm sure that mispronunciation, I'm sure he even forgot about that a week, maybe the day after. But I still remember it to this day, and at some point I incorporated it into one of my passwords. So yeah, making up words or combining and modifying words that exist, but in a very elaborate way. So this is something similar to the method that you mentioned, that you could use sentences. So it's something like that. Sometimes I do use sentences, but those sentences tend to be very peculiarly worded, I should say. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I overdo it and I'm not able to remember them, but mostly I do, and I think. But I'm very confident in the way I do this. So and because you mentioned that a password manager is a single point of failure, I'm not really planning on using one in the future. So I'm happy with my method. As for viruses and malware, as for malware and viruses, so I'm using both Windows and Linux, but I share the mentality that the best antivirus, but I share the mentality that the best antivirus is common sense. So even on Windows, I haven't used any paid for antivirus in years. I just use Windows Defender. So if you keep that up to date, it should be. And I also recently started using what's its name? Malwarebytes. Their free scan version. Their free edition, which lets you scan your drives.
My security on Windows is a little bit different since I do have that one partition on my laptop that is a Windows partition. It's I don't put anything that I care about on there other than my Steam account. And if it does magically end up with a virus somehow, which should be impossible since I don't even open up a browser with it, I'm quite willing to nuke it and start over.
So yeah, for me, Bitwarden, when I suspect I might have a virus, I just do a scan with Bitwarden. So not Bitwarden, I just do a scan with Malwarebytes. But other than that, I'm just relying on common sense and the Windows Defender. On the Linux side of things, I tried to use ClamAV at one point, but since there are way less malware out there for Linux, I'm not really using that long term either. So on Linux, I just rely on common sense. There was one case when I suspected there might be a virus on my Windows. There was one case years ago when I suspected there might be a virus on my Windows system. That was even before I moved to Linux, but I couldn't really find it. But I was still not sure if it was just some very recent or advanced malware that Windows Defender or Malwarebytes just couldn't show. And that was around the time when I started looking into Linux for security concerns. So before that, I wasn't very security conscious, but just the thought of having virus that you might not even be able to detect. And now, years later, when I'm using Linux, I recently heard about a virus or malware that mines crypto for your computer is idle and you're not at your computer. And when it detects that you're back at your computer, it stops any activity and it hides behind Windows services, so you are not able to detect it. And when you're using it's not using resources, so it's pretty good at hiding. So that's something.
Now you can have Norton do that for you.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah.
But they take 15%, which is pretty bad.
Yeah. So I've been using a desktop for years, but a little more than a year ago I bought my laptop, and I wanted to do a boot Windows with Linux on it as well, but I realized I didn't really have any use for Windows, so I just never used Windows on it. And as for browsing, this is more privacy and not as much security stuff. But of course, there are not only but of course, you don't only have to worry about attackers. You have to worry about the companies that use your data. So I generally now tend to use two web browsers at a time. I've been using Brave and LibreWolf, but now I moved to Firefox and LibreWolf, which is Firefox based. And LibreWolf is a more security-oriented version of Firefox. So by default, it doesn't even remember history, which I turned off because I didn't really want a browser to be full incognito, because if I wanted, I just open an incognito tab. But it's supposed to have less tracking, and it even has. I'm not remember what its name is. Okay, so. And LibreWolf also has the Firefox container tabs implemented by default, as well as uBlock Origin. So on my daily driver Firefox, I don't really seek out actively any sort of ad blocking, but I'm sure. I think Firefox might have something like that by default, considering that I don't see as many ads as I see that I did when I was using Chrome. Can anybody confirm that? I'm not sure. But still, Firefox also now has that super cookie blocking feature. And as much as Firefox and Mozilla had some bad made some bad decisions lately and had some bad media coverage, I would still keep using Firefox and going back to Chrome any day.
I agree.
I would even use Firefox before Chromium. Maybe unGoogled Chromium would be a more security-oriented option, but on Chromium you cannot sync your bookmarks anymore.
Yep.
And I decided to go to Firefox to see if I have any problem, and if I have any problem, I might go back to something Chromium-based. So far, I haven't really had any major problems. There was a weird issue when I wasn't able to download files from Google Drive, but that seems to have resolved itself somehow. So I also started using DuckDuckGo alongside Google, but I still tend to go to Google just for convenience when I want to have better results. But there were cases, for example, I tend to bring up medical issues as an example. So when someone wants to search for a medical issue or a given or some medicine, that's not really Google's business, or even your ISP's business, whether you visit a website that is like associated with a disease or illness, or you look up a specific medicine or treatment method. So when I had to look up a specific illness last year, I was on my phone. I turned on my VPN and I opened the DuckDuckGo and I opened the DuckDuckGo browser and I did it there. And
Yeah.
it had perfectly reasonable results, I think.
Yeah, if I have some medical related question, I always use my virtual machine, which has the dedicated VPN on it, so that traffic can only go through the VPN.
Yeah.
And I know we did a whole show on my setup for that one, but it's extremely useful for things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Pro tip too, when you're using DuckDuckGo, prepend your search with Bang G, and it will give you anonymized Google results.
But I tried that and it just redirected me to the Google.
It's Google, but it's not signed in, so there's no way to. It's not associating your search with your account.
But it redirected me to google.com itself.
Right, but it's not signed in, though. You're not.
Okay, I'm going to try that now.
Unless you have another tab open where you are signed into Google.
Okay,
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, I'm just going to try this now. Well,
right now you are signed into Google. That's because you're using Google Docs, so it won't make a difference.
But I am. But even if I'm not signed into Google, I can just go to Google, and it will be the same as the GBank, no? Because it still goes to google.com, and Google can still see my IP address.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are those aggregation. But there are those search aggregators. I'm not sure what, like Startpage, I think is one of them. That
Yes.
Fetch. And there's even one. I think Cirx is its name that you can self-host.
Oh wow, yeah. I gotta say, DuckDuckGo has gotten pretty good in recent years.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
they are working on their own browser right now. They have it for Android and iOS, but they are working on one for Linux and Windows.
It's based on Chromium, though.
It is based on Chromium, but it still has their own searching.
Yeah, I don't know. Just use Firefox.
Yeah, I don't use any Chromium things either. Yeah. I don't care how privacy-based they claim to be.
Isn't Firefox making Google their primary search engine now?
No, Firefox is that was a Linux Mint thing.
Okay.
Firefox always had Google as their default, I think, but Linux Mint was changing it to Yahoo, but now they have to have Google as well.
Right.
Yeah, their default will be Google, but you can still change it.
Garuda. When I tried Garuda, Garuda uses the Garuda uses the Garuda uses the Firebird web browser, which is a fork of LibreWolf. And when I tried it, I think their default search engine was their own self-hosted instance of Cirx. And now I looked it up, and it's cirx.garudalinux.org. So that's Cirx as in SEARX.garudalinux.org. And I see no reason why it wouldn't be usable on any other system.
Okay. Well, if that's everything.
Well, I want to. So I also mentioned the VPN, and the VPN I've been using is called Winscribe. I just happened to find it years ago, and it seemed a good. They had a deal, so I started using it, and I started paying for it after the after the deal ended. They have a very interesting plan that's called they have a very interesting build-it-yourself plan. So you can either, by default, you can either pay monthly or yearly, and you can use all of their server locations. But you can also have a build-it-yourself. But you can also pick and choose different server locations, more specifically countries, and that's $1 per country. So if you choose like five countries that you might want to use, that's 5 countries per month, and you also get 20 gigs per country. So if you select 5 countries, that's $5 a month, and you get 100 gigabytes. They also have a plus $1 option for unlimited data, which I also selected, and another $1 option for like add more advanced, I think firewall or some online protection. So that's around. You can pay a couple of dollars, maybe $5 a month. And I've been using
it's only €6 a month for Molvad, and that gets you all of their nodes and IPv6 and WireGuard and everything you could possibly use. So that doesn't sound like a great deal, but that's okay.
Well, it is better than, for example, something like ExpressVPN and NordVPN. But yeah, I really should look into Molvad, because I haven't really checked at them before. I just know that they're but I did hear a lot of good things about them. And Winscribe, the one I use, has a Linux client that was CLI only for the longest time, but now they came out with a new GUI Linux client, and they actually made the step to open source their client. So previously their client wasn't open source, but now it is. Which is, I'm not sure how many big VPN providers do that, but it's certainly a nice gesture.
Well, the only ratings websites for VPNs I've seen that have Winscribe highly rated also have Winscribe as a sponsor. So I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
Well, So far I've been satisfied with them, but it's also like Joe said. It's what was the expression?
Can't prove a negative.
Not about moving trust, or
passing the trust.
Because so it's passing the trust. But for example, I would say that a VPN provider would care less about whatever medical condition you search for than Google themselves. Because a VPN provider is not, because Google is an ad company at this point. They get most of the revenue from ads. So and most of the things, I would imagine a VPN company would care less about your internet history than your IPS.
They wouldn't be worth much if they did.
Yeah. It is passing the trust, but in a way, it's still, if you trust your VPN more than your ISP, then you would obviously want to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Just a couple things I want to add here. Not necessarily to your stuff, Norbert, but in general. If our listeners, if you're out there and you have listened to these topics and you want us to do a deep dive on any specific topics, please send us an email, mintcast@mintcast.org, and we will do a show dedicated to whatever topic gets the most requests for us to deep dive on.
Hey, we'll probably do a show on anything that gets requested.
Yeah, honestly. But also, because of the changes at Google, eventually our email is going to have to change. I think it's by like June or something like that, because we're not going to be paying $6 per month per host for something that, we don't get paid for. But yeah. So I don't know what the email is going to end up being, but it will be changing eventually. So use it while you can. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to add last minute?
Nope, that does it for me.
All right. We're going to move on.
Well, maybe one thing.
Oh, go for it.
Whereas an interesting contrast, while on my PC I tend to be more privacy conscious. On my phone, I'm still just going for convenience. I mean, stuff like Google Maps. I did go and disable most of the. I did go and disable all of the tracking in my Google account that I could find an option for. So, for example, the physical location history in Google Maps and stuff like that. And but Google Maps is one of the best Google services, and it's really convenient to use. As well as, I use an Android phone, so Android itself is not very privacy oriented. But if you don't do anything on your phone that you might be concerned Google knowing about, or maybe even just being okay with Google knowing about what you do. I mean, I search for a bunch of stuff on my phone, but I'm not really worried about Google. I mean, as I assume Google is still collecting data because they do build the profile of people, but sometimes I do see some ads that are relevant to me. So as long as I get some relevant ads every once in a while, that I might really like to see, I'm not that worried about Google collecting general data, like when I search for something like universities of education or something career related, because that's still not on the level of something like again, I'm bringing up the example of medical issues. So it's a matter of where you draw the line among stuff that you are okay with Google seeing. And since we see that pure Linux phones aren't really ready yet to be used as a daily driver, I'm just going to stick with my Android phone and enjoy the convenience of the Play Store and Play services.
Okay. Well, I would say that we're moving on to vibrations from the ether, but we did not receive any emails. Boo. So let's move on to check this out. Norbert?
I just remember that I created a diagram a few weeks ago. It might have been because I was interested, because there's that very big chart online about every Linux distribution that ever existed and their relation, and which was forked from that and which is based on which one and wherever they merged. But I wanted to see a list of but I wanted to have a list of only those distributions that are still active today, to see how long they have been around, and only those distributions that are considered independent, in the sense that they don't pull their packages from another distribution upstream from them. So they don't have any distro upstream from them. So for example, Fedora is independent because they package everything themselves, and those packages go down to Red Hat. So in that sense, Red Hat is based on Fedora. And I created this chart, and you will find the link in the show notes. I find it very interesting. So of course on the top there's Slackware and Debian, which have been around since 1993. And the most recent one that I could find that is intended for desktop usage, which I only included those that are intended for desktop usage, not specific stuff like IoT devices. And the most recent one that I could find is Solus, which was started in 2014, so the actual independent Solus. So it's if you are interested in this chart, you can take a look at it. I also created it in a way that whenever So I also did it in a way that when a independent distribution was discontinued, but replaced with an official fork. So for example, when Red Hat was discontinued and replaced with Fedora, of which Red Hat Enterprise Linux is based on, so then I considered the start date of Red Hat for the column of Fedora. I mean, I don't really want to explain it in detail because it's best to look at and explore that way. So you will.
So you haven't added Serpent OS yet?
Oh, I mean, Serpent OS isn't out yet.
Yeah, I don't think you can get an ISO for that yet.
I also accidentally created the chart in a way that it shows every distribution to be still active at the end of 2022, which I was hoping it would still be correct in order not to make this obsolete. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that Solus will die anytime soon, even with the recent news. So yeah, take a look at it if you're interested.
Okay, and moving on to our announcements. Our next episode will be at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on February 6th, 2022. And we have a link in the show notes for converting that to your time zone. And our next live stream will be at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on January the 29th, 2022. And link for that as well. Now, on to the wrap-up. I'm Joe, and if you want to listen to some of my other podcasts, I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, and you can get that at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can find me on MeWe. You can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org, or you can follow the link in the show notes and buy me a coffee. Moss?
Okay, I'm on Full Circle Weekly News, Distro Hoppers Digest, there are links. My other contact information can be found on itsmoss.com, and my email is bardmoss@pm.me.
And Josh Hawk, who wasn't able to make it onto the show today, you can send him an email, joshontech@mintcast.org, at joshontech on Twitter, and most other social sites. Or you can listen to him on his other podcast, Crowbar Kernel Panic. Norbert?
You can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org, as long as we still have these addresses.
Yeah, well, for another couple of months. We'll have to figure something out. And then there's the other Josh. You can send him emails, jt@mintcast.org, Josh Thacker on Discord, and @metal_foss on Twitter. Nishant was also not able to make the show today. You can send him emails, nishant@mintcast.org. Recon Ghost on Instagram, Recon Ghost at GitHub, Ghost.recon on Discord, Maverick00783 at Steam. Bill, how about you?
Well, for the time being, you can mail me bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord. At WC Hauser3 on Twitter, and I'm even WC Hauser3 on that there Facebook.
Okay, before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Norbert for our audio editing, Josh Lowe for all his work on the website, Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, and Londoner for our time sync. Bytemark Hosting for hosting mintcast.org and our backup Mumble server. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. And the Linux Mint development team for the distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Grazie mille.
Okay.
And it's a wrap.
That was a good show. 2 hours and 36 minutes of recording. And I'm stopping my recording now.
Stopping.
Export. What format were we doing the names as?
It's number dash name with a capital letter, the name.
379. Yeah.
Yep.
379 dash Weber.
Artist name, Sir William Hauser.
I'm not sure. Did anyone? I'm not sure if anyone. Oh, okay. Aris sent me a private message saying that LeetSpeak is not inside password cracking dictionaries. That's interesting. It might be an oversight by someone who wants to by people who create those dictionaries.
No, someone was saying in the YouTube that LeetSpeak is. Eris said LeetSpeak is now in the password cracking dictionaries.
Oh, wait, did I misread that? He is now inside, not inside. Okay.
Yeah, it's now in the password cracking dictionaries. So yeah, and that was older information from some from when I used to watch a lot of Hack 5. So that was Shannon Morse and what's his name?
We need an audio folder, people.
Oh.
Give me a minute, I'll make one.
Okay.
Or someone can make one. That guy. Darn it, I should remember his name. But I haven't watched them regularly in a couple of years because they completely changed their format.
I created the folder. Or did someone do it already?
I don't see it yet. There it is.
I have a folder.
Nothing in it.
But I just created 379 audio.
Yeah, got it.
But what did you name it, Moss?
I didn't create one. I said I found one.
Oh, okay. I heard I got a folder, so I thought you already got. It wasn't you already made one.
$379. I'm looking.
And I see a bill.
There's 378. There's 375.
I got mine uploaded.
Darn it, where is it?
Why is this so hard?
There it is. All right. And documents. 379.
Good.
Okay, are we ready for me to kill the live stream?
Yep.
Thanks, Londoner.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Aris, for all the feedback while the show was going on.
I keep a page up and I try to communicate with those guys.
Yeah, I got a lot going on, so I try to switch back and forth.
I know. I got a big dual monitor set up here.
Yeah, me too.
Triple monitor over here, but I still forgot to pull up the chat.
All right, ending the stream. And it is ended.